One of the most important principles of relationships is understanding where the other person is coming from so that you can treat them how you would want to be treated. So, how would you want to be treated if you were in their shoes? To know that, you really need to understand their perspective and understand why they do what they do. Number one, understand the human desire to see ourselves as good people. A huge reason why people act the way they do is that they want to feel like they are a good person. People have a need to see themselves as a good person because they have to live with themselves and the decisions they have made for the rest of their lives. Can you imagine being married to someone that you're constantly embarrassed by? And on top of that, you no longer believe that they're a good person. You can't bring yourself to respect them, and the love that you once had turns to resentment that you're stuck with this person for the rest of your life. That is a nightmare from hell, which is why if two people want to stay married, they absolutely have to believe that their spouse is a good person at heart, even if it doesn't feel like it sometimes. They need to hold on to the love and respect that they have for each other as desperately as if their lives depended on it, because they kind of do. Now, even more desperately than that, we all need to see ourselves as good people, because you can't divorce yourself. So if you want to keep on living, you have to hold on to some kind of self-respect. Number two, understand the human capacity to justify anything. Our desire to see ourselves as good people means that we are all capable of justifying pretty much anything. For instance, it's rare that someone steals something unless they needed it more than the owner did. And almost all murderers can justify why they did it. This feeling is summed up pretty well by this quote. I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures, helping them have a good time. And all I get is abuse, the existence of a hunted man. That quote is from Al Capone, the legendary American crime boss. Even Bonnie and Clyde considered themselves to be heroes, fighting the system that had crushed the American working class. Humans are capable of justifying literally anything, right or wrong. Now, just because people feel the need to justify themselves does not mean that this is the best way to go about life. So here's 2 tips for self-improvement that could make your life better than that alternative. Tip number 1, understand that there is a better way. So if we personally want to have a life that makes it easy to live with ourselves, then we need to fight the urge to justify our actions. If you did something that was actually wrong, or even if you just could have handled the situation better, then own it. Here's a 3-step process to make it easier to live with yourself. Number 1, take responsibility specifically for what you did that you would like to do differently in the future. Number 2, ask for forgiveness when it's appropriate and forgive yourself. The combination of forgiveness and taking responsibility should result in a change of heart on the situation, which will enable you to change how you handle it in the future. Number 3, change the behavior. Follow through with your change of heart. Make sure that specific thing doesn't continue to be a part of your life. These 3 steps are essential to our personal development. Tip number 2, understand the advantage of being forgiven. Now, this is where Christians have a serious advantage over everyone else. No other worldview empowers forgiveness the way Christianity does. God's forgiveness empowers us to forgive ourselves and others. Like it says, when we confess our sins, God is faithful and just to forgive us our sins. We are a new creation in His eyes. And it only makes sense that if He sees us that way, then we should see ourselves that way too. If God forgave us, then we should also forgive ourselves. It's not that we don't learn from our mistakes. As a matter of fact, this enables us to learn from them. We can now look at our mistakes and see where we messed up without believing that that defines us. Jesus has given us everything we need to overcome our struggles and become the person that we should be. Our struggles do not have the power to hold us prisoner anymore. That might sound a little weird, but think about this. If we are unable to admit it when we mess up, then we're saying to ourselves, we didn't do anything wrong. So if there's nothing wrong with what we did, then why would we change it in the future? The answer is we won't. And this is how we can become prisoners of our struggles. Now, how should we apply these things to how we treat other people? Application 1, don't hold grudges. If grace and forgiveness can make it easier to live with ourselves, then it will also make it easier to live with other people. So don't hold grudges. They make it harder to treat people the right way. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus taught us to forgive others just like he forgave us. Application number 2, don't criticize others. When you're dealing with other people, there will be times when they're just doing it all wrong. And you will notice, but don't criticize them. Because anything that feels like condescension, condemnation, or disrespect will be resented. It's very hard to not resent someone when you feel like they're looking down on you. Remember, they need to feel good about themselves if they don't want to be absolutely miserable. And if you make them feel bad about themselves, then you are now their enemy. I'm not saying that this is a good thing or even that it's a healthy thing, but it is human nature. And everyone does this if we're pushed far enough. Think about this proverb for a second. Do not reprove a scoffer or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man and he will love you. Proverbs 9 verse 8. Now think about this. How many times in your life do you think you will have the opportunity to correct a wise person? Probably not very often, because wise people generally don't need correction. So, as a rule, we should not criticize others in a way that will make them feel bad about themselves. Now, some of you might be wondering how that works when sharing the gospel. You're probably thinking, don't people have to be told if they're sinners to be saved? Well, the thing is that sin screws up your life. And people tend to notice when that happens to them. So focus on God's forgiveness that empowers you to live a new and different life. The only situation this might not work in is if they think they already have it all figured out. Jesus dealt with a lot of these self-righteous types, mostly Pharisees. And even he didn't win a lot of them over. When he talked to them about their sin, it usually just made them angry with him. But with the people who actually chose to follow him, how often did he start off by telling them how messed up they were? Not very often, because those people already knew that their lives were messed up. And Jesus was offering them the solution. We're going to talk about a lot of different ways that you can influence people and ways that you can share your opinion with people where they're unlikely to accept it. But for now, try to put these things into practice. Don't hold grudges. Don't scold people, and be careful with your criticism. Don't do or say anything that's going to make them feel disrespected or condemned. We're going to be getting a lot of these ideas out of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This next week, we'll have some stories to illustrate how you can still correct and influence people without criticizing them.